Where are we?
Okay, so after a long intermission, thanks to quarantine restrictions,
Etc.
we're back.
Baruch
And
Hashem.
we're going to learn a Maimer on Vayeishev. And before we start the Maimer on Vayeishev, which is going to be on Daf Kafchet Amudah Gimel, on folio 28, side 3, or column 3. And this Maimer is going to deal with dreams. So today is Kaf Kislev. It's the second part of the 2-day celebration of the Alter Rebbe's release from prison.
Okay, so I'll give you a beautiful Chassidic expression on the meaning of dreams. The Kloisenberger Rebbe, Rabbi Kuti or Halberstam, or Rabbi Shalom, lost his wife and 10 children in the Shah in Auschwitz. He came to Eretz Yisrael 46, broken. He got remarried, he had kids, and then he built the whole world. He built Kiryat Sanz in Netanya, he built Kiryat Sanz in Yerushalayim, and he built the Beit Avot, and he built a hospital, and he built this and he built that. So some guy said to him, how, after all what you went through, did you build so much? So the Kloisenberger said, because I had dreams of what I needed to do. And the guy said to him, but I also dream, and it doesn't help me. And the Kloisenberger says, yes, but I dream with my eyes open. Yeah. So, dreams.
So when the Alter Rebbe, we've talked about this in the past, when the Alter Rebbe was let out of prison, the whole affair happened in Tafkuf Nun Zayin.
What year was that?
That was 1797.
Okay.
But actually it was already in it was still 1797. And once he got out of prison,
before he passed away.
it was 15 years before he passed away, 14 years. Actually, it was even less, it was 13 years. Up till that time, he had run Chabad. It was no Chabad then, but he had run the Chassidus that he had. He didn't call it yet Chabad.
With short memory.
He ran it like a regular Polish Rebbe. And the main thing that he dealt with most of the time were his Chassidim. He was the main Rebbe in Russia. And he had hundreds of people coming to him every day. And you can see this from most of his letters, most of the public letters that he made public to people. From the time that the Maggid had passed away in 1773. The Maggid passed away in Tafkuf Lamed Gimel. 1773.
So that's about 20 years before.
26 years.
Yeah.
Exactly 26 years. So during that time, most of his public epistles were about limiting people from coming to Liozhna, which was the town that he lived in.
There was the Seder who could come.
Seder, there was Balagan.
Mm-hmm.
But it mostly was created because there were so many people coming to seek his advice. And he dealt most of the time. Those were the years that he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. And he...
The Shulchan Aruch, the Maggid asked him to.
Yeah, but he didn't finish. It took him a few years to finish. It's a monumental work, which unfortunately we have very little of. And most of the time he was seeing people. And it came to the point where they had to limit it so that there were all kinds of conditions for somebody to be allowed to come twice a year. And then there were all these restrictions that if you came more than twice a year, you would get this punishment. The punishments were nobody would host you, something like that. The Rebbe wouldn't see you. You wouldn't be invited into the shul. All kinds of stuff. It was all tried. It was all an attempt to limit the number of people who came to see him. And I think he failed. It's just so clear from all his letters that he's trying this and trying that, and it's just not working, and people are just coming. And in the end, he's got a compassionate heart, so how can he say no to somebody? And I'm sure that in spite of all the regulations and all the restrictions and so on and so forth, there were all these exceptions. And it turns out that everything is an exception to the rule. There's no more rule left, and it's gone. And then in 1797, he was accused by the government and so on, and the whole story. And he comes out after 53 days, and he tells a story. He tells an interesting story. He says, when I was in prison, I asked
The
my
Maggid came to
teachers,
The Maggid of Mezritch came.
why did this happen? What am I being accused of in heaven? So they said, because you're distributing Chassidus, you're disseminating Chassidus, you're disseminating the secrets of the Torah. So he said, should I stop?
No. Therefore, I'm better stop.
That's good. So they said, no, on the contrary,
More.
you should do it even more. So from that you understand that the problem was that he was disseminating Chassidus, but in a way that wasn't appropriate. Meaning that they had an idea above that he was supposed to do it in a different way. What was a different way? It should be, so the Rebbe has a sicha on it, very interesting sicha I just heard last night, for Bringen that I enjoyed very much in our shul. And I tried to look for the sicha, but it turns out that volume is, I don't know where it is, it's somewhere in the house, I can't find it, I wanted to read it myself. What?
I've all the
Tafshin Lamed. Whatever.
Anyway.
Anyway,
Printed books?
it's printed already.
Which volume?
Tafshin Lamed, whatever's missing here. Samach Beis. No, it's up there. Memchet. Oh, somebody's here. Come in! Somebody's knocking on the door.
I'll bring it tomorrow. Remind me.
So, I think somebody's knocking on the door. So he came out, and he went back to Liozhna, and nothing really changed. So for the next 2 years, 1798, 1799, through the end of 1799, 1800, nothing really changed. It was always the same. I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, I'm guessing because of the amount of people that came to see him, nothing changed also. And so he simply had no way to do anything different. He was still locked into that way that he was working, and it was all taking care of people instead of being able to change the way he wanted to teach. But then in 1801, he was put in prison again.
Came out on the fourth day.
And he said that it was a much lighter hashama, how do you say?
Incarnation.
No, indictment.
Incarceration.
What was brought against him was much easier to answer, and it wasn't a problem that much. But it took longer, took a little bit longer. But he said it was a lot harder for him the second time than the first time. And I haven't researched it enough. I don't know if he ever said anything about why he felt that it was more difficult. But it seems to me pretty clear that he felt that he was being indicted again because he didn't make good on what he had learned the first time, which was that he needs to change the way that he teaches. He needs to change the whole focus of Chassidus. He has to make it into something much more explained and well explained and addressing something different. So interestingly, when he was released the second time, he didn't go back to Liozhna. I never understood this part. He never went back. He didn't get his stuff. He sent messengers to bring his books and his belongings and his family, and he just moved to a new place called Liadi. For instance, then he was known as the Alter Rebbe, the Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Nobody remembers the Liozhna, except if you're a Lubavitcher, so you know that he was in Liozhna first.
There's a logic to that. There's a very obvious logic if you think about it. New place, new time, new setup, new shul, new rules.
So it didn't hit me until this Shabbos when I thought about it, like why he did that, and I suddenly understood he just had to start a new leaf. There's no way to continue in the same place and continue with the same type, with a new type of teaching. It's just not going to work. So he had to leave for a new place called Liadi, and actually
it's not very far.
Okay, but actually, another fact that I learned only this Shabbos was that he had never had a celebration for his 1797 release from prison until he moved to Liadi. Meaning he didn't even have time to have, meaning he didn't have time. He could have, but apparently he felt that it wasn't warranted yet until he starts this new leaf. And then the question becomes, what did he say during that celebration? What did he say?
You mean the anniversary, the first, second?
It was the
Yud Tes
third anniversary of his
Third
release.
Yud Tes Kislev.
Yeah. Third Yud Tes Kislev was the first time he had a Farbrengen on Yud Tes Kislev. So it's not at all clear. It's very hard to find out. I haven't been able to find out exactly. But I know what he said the Shabbos before.
How do you know that?
Because it says in the Sefer Ma'amarim of Tavkuf Samach Beis,
Okay.
and Tavkuf Samach Beis turns out to be the first year that he had the Farbrengen, at least as far as I can put the numbers together, it seems to be the first year. And he taught this seminal mimer that I've been talking about called Zecher Rav Tuvcha Yabil, where he begins to explain the Baal Shem Tov's and the Maggid's understanding of reality in very clear terms. Like, what is behind all this?
His reality or the whole world's reality?
How they saw the world. What did they see? How did they see it maybe, differently, in some sense? And why is Chassidus really, everything's been said already, and yet it's new. There's something new about it. And in that mimer, which I until now have been reading from the wrong book, I've been reading it from, as it turns out, the Sidurim Dach, the Siddur that has the Maimarim on it. And there they say in the footnotes, and I've read it to you even, that this version of the Maimer, this version of the essay, is from his son, is not from him. And I kept stressing, no, it is from him. But I'm wrong, it's not from him, it's from his son, you can tell. Because it's too ordered, it's a compilation of many times that he spoke these things. It's true that he repeated this essay many times, the Alter Rebbe. But his son compiled everything together into one essay that would have all the parts together. So that's why people learn it from the Sidurim Dach. It's really based on everything that his father said. And it's even not with his long explanations. Usually the Mittler Rebbe, his son, explains things. He can take 5 pages and turn it into 50 easily. So here it's short. It's the way that his father used to explain. So certainly it's based on everything that his father said, but it's not the original way that he taught it. And I learned this again and again and again and again, and I kept feeling something's missing. Something's missing. I don't get it. There's something missing here. Until I learned
Thus
that this.
Thus we go back to Rabbi Shneur Zalman, Gaffney, who says, if you see a quote, a reference, and you don't go and look it up,
but
you're an Amhoritz and a Schwitzer. That's what he told me.
But here I didn't think there was anywhere to look it up.
Look it up.
Because I thought this was the original mimer.
Okay.
This was the original essay.
That wasn't the way to do
it's true. I've learned the same thing from my teachers. That everything you see quoted, you have to open up to see how it's quoted and where it's quoted from. Without the context, it's not worth very much.
Right.
So then the Shabbos, what hit me this Shabbos is that I have to start learning Tafkuf Samach Beis. Now, I opened the book up. It's one of the first Chabad books I bought. It was impossible to get for many years because it was one of the first things the Rebbe printed. This was printed in 1975. I was 4 years old. And I think I bought it when I was 20. So 15 years later, it was still a few to buy. But then it wasn't around for years.
The Rebbe printed it from what? From a manuscript?
Yeah, there's a bichel. There's a manuscript from the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek. But it's in the Alter Rebbe's handwriting. So apparently he wrote it either before or after he even spoke the essays. He wrote them. So I've had this, and then I opened it up, and it always stuck out in my library because it's so different than everything else. And then I opened it up, and I saw that it's marked, meaning that I learned in it. But I don't think I understood the meaning, how important this was. But now it's only struck me that this is the shifting point in the whole way that he explained things. That this
new paradigm.
1802,
new paradigm.
It's a new paradigm. And so I thought that really we should spend more time looking at the Maimarim the way they are here. Everything in the end, from what I can tell, is taken from this year. It's like an expansion. There are new things. It's not that there's no new things, obviously. But the seed of everything that he explains later is really in this year that he came out from the second incarceration.
Which is now 1800.
he came out in 1801. In 1802, he began to speak. It starts in 1801, really, because of the way that the Goyish years are. But so I learned the mimer there. The same essay, Zecher Rav Tuvcha Yabiu, I learned it here, and suddenly everything clicked in place. There was two words that were missing. They're not missing. They're just not stressed in the way that his son wrote it. He doesn't put the stress on them, but here he puts the stress on them. And if you read the essay before, the essay after, you begin to see this is what he's talking about. The whole, probably most of the book. That's what's concerning him. So to put it in the two words that I was missing there, and that have been making my mind churn since Erev Shabbos when I saw this. The two words are change versus, I guess, static, or
status quo.
No, so now I don't want status quo. Change versus, I guess, there's no way to say statisticity. You can't say that. But being static, unchanging. The change versus unchanging, and that's the paradox he's dealing with from the very beginning. That he begins to fulfill his new calling to explain what the Baal Shem Tov and what the Maggid had never really explained. They had just assumed it and never said it explicitly. So he's got this change and unchanging paradox, that the world is, you have to look at the world in two ways constantly. One is the way that it's changing, the other way is the way in which it's unchanging entirely. And there's a whole question, how can you believe that the world is not changing? It's a whole problem, because if you come and tell me, what do you mean? I, 2 days ago, didn't understand what I'm now saying. So where did this come from? I must have changed. It's very hard for me to say I didn't change.
Why must you have changed? Why don't you just say that, slowly but surely, you understood what was said?
But I changed over time. It happened quickly, it happened slowly. Say it like this, that all of Greek thought, in a certain sense, was ruining the world, and again, philosophically, because everybody was affected by Heraclitus. Heraclitus. Heraclitus, as you say in Greek.
Who's that?
He was one of the pre-Socratics. And he was famous about his things about change. That if you want to understand the world, if you want to get into physics, into psychology, anything, you have to look at change. Okay? And he was one who coined the famous phrase, you can't step into the same river twice. Okay? Because the river is flowing. And really what he meant by the river was reality. You can never grab reality twice. There's a lot to be said for that. That's a very true statement. It's not untrue. But that runs contradictory to what we believe God is. Because God is above time. Time creates change, that's for sure. Or time is at least what allows change to be recorded, to be felt, to be experienced. But beyond time, that's where God is. He created time. So he's beyond change. And then we have this pasuk that is stressed really only in Chassidus. Nobody talks about this. It's very interesting. The pasuk in, I think it's Ishaya, Ki ani avaya lo shaniti, ve'atem b'nei Yisrael lo chlitem. It's not Ishaya, it's one of the minor prophets, I don't remember who. Ki ani avaya lo shaniti means, because I, Hashem, have not changed. And therefore, supposedly you, the Jewish people, have not been destroyed, annihilated. But in Chassidus it's read different. If you understand that I, Hashem, am unchanging, God is unchanging. So how is it? It's a question that's directed at us. How is it that you, the Jewish people, have not self-annihilated? Meaning, how is it that you are not klitem, meaning that you burn with yearning for me, as if you're burning yourself up. That's how it's understood in Chassidus. That when you understand that Hashem is also unchanging, that should change your whole perspective on reality. And that's what's missing from regular human experience. Human experience is almost entirely focused on change. So Galileo reinvents science in the 16th century by beginning to document and record and quantify change. So he takes a ball and he rolls it down the slope and he measures how long it takes, and all the things that modern science has been able to achieve start from that moment of calculating, quantifying change. Because that's all of modern science from beginning to end. We're looking at change. But Torah has a chiddush, or at least Chassidus has a chiddush. It's not just from Chassidus. Obviously, they didn't invent anything new. They just took it seriously. And they said there must be a dimension of reality where you experience not change, but the lack thereof. And who do you experience then? You experience God, who is above the mind. Because the human mind is about change. It's true that it's about change. But to get to a higher place, you have to elevate yourself above experience of reality as changing all the time. And that's what he explains, as far as I can tell you, the Shabbos before, it might have been the actual Yutes Farbrengen that he did, the first one that he did, and tried to explain what is different about the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid. What are they saying that hasn't been said until now? And then everything works on that. That the paradox of human existence is to understand both change and not change. And again, I don't have a good word yet for the not change.
Static.
Even in Hebrew, it's shaniti v'lo shaniti. I change and I don't change. In Hebrew, there's a word kviut, kavua.
There is a word for static.
But really, there shouldn't be a word because we're talking about something that's beyond regular experience. It would be very hard to give a word for it. But the moment you're willing to entertain the idea that beyond everything we're experiencing, which is an experience of change, there is something that is unchanging, which really, that's what we mean by God, then a whole new dimension opens up in your experience, because maybe you can tap into that. So what's the first thing that comes to mind? That when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, we close our eyes. So I used to explain it before I read this mimer, this essay again, on Shabbos evening. I used to explain it that because it runs contradictory. To say that God is one, it runs contradictory to the plurality of reality. Okay? It's very difficult to say Hashem is one and keep your eyes open and not think you're an idiot. You're fooling yourself. Who are you fooling? So I close my eyes and I say, there's something deep down inside that's really unifying everything. I just can't see it. And when I open my eyes, I see the opposite. Every person's kind of against the other person, and everybody's separate, and everybody has their own agenda, and so on and so forth, and all these forces and so on. But then I suddenly realized that when you're closing your eyes, you're not closing it in order not to see reality. You're closing them in order to prevent your eyes from seeing change. Meaning, if I could have a static picture of reality, it would be fine. And that's what I'm really trying to do. I'm trying to freeze reality for a moment and go beyond the changes to what's not changing, to what's constant always. And the reason for that, he explains in the mimer.
Oh, the word is constant.
What?
The word is constant.
Oh. So he says, really, eyesight has two parts to it. Eyesight itself. There's the part that's eyesight is seeing change and the part where it's not seeing change. So strangely enough, we talked about this, a year ago or so. I told you about the experiment that established that the reason that we see the way we see is because our eyes are constantly moving, even if we don't know that they're moving. And it's a micro movement. It's very tiny. But without that, there's no ability to see anything. It's very interesting. The brain is so used to seeing change that if you freeze the picture, for real, if the eyes would suddenly stop these micro movements, you would stop seeing anything. Because you're so used to it. Not because nobody would say there's nothing there. Of course there's something there. Why is the eye working any differently? It's still, the light's still being reflected into your pupils, and your cones and what are the other ones called? I can't remember. The rods are still registering the photons. So why is it if the eye's not moving that you can't see anything? So the answer is because the brain's so used to seeing change. And if you don't see change, you don't see. You literally don't see. And there was a famous experiment, I told you about this, that was done in the 1950s by the physician who discovered this. I don't remember who his name is. I'll probably look it up on YouTube or on Wikipedia because it's important to know the details. But he figured out that there were these micro movements, and he speculated that really they cause us to see because we can't see without seeing change. So the eye, so if nothing's moving, the eye has to move. But he thought about how could I stop the movements, and there was no good way in the 1950s to do it. And he researched until he came up with the idea that the Indians in the Amazon, when they shoot a jaguar or whatever they have there, they tip their arrows in some poison. Maybe it's the same thing as, I guess that's why it has its heart problems, which causes only muscle tissue to freeze. But it's not supposed to stop the heart. That's very interesting. That needs to be so, because these animals, they capture them alive. They don't want them to die. So I guess it is what you're saying. And usually it's not supposed to cause, maybe it causes some arrhythmia, but it causes just immobility. And he speculated that if it shuts down all the muscles, it'll also shut down the eye muscles. And so he had an experiment done on himself, and they strapped him into, because he knew he would fall otherwise, because all his muscles are frozen. So they strapped him into an upright table, and they gave him the shot. And he said it was the scariest thing he's ever done. And for 20 minutes until it wore off, he couldn't see. He was alive, and only when people moved, that's how they set it up. He couldn't talk, he couldn't say anything. He said only when people themselves moved could he see them. But if they stopped moving, they canceled out, and then he saw nothing. And so I think that it was proven by that. I don't know what was done afterwards with this incredible insight. So when we close our eyes, it's not that we're trying not to see the world. We're trying to see the world that's not moving, what's behind everything. So all of this is a very complex way to get into that same Shabbos, or that same week, the week of Yud Kislev. The Alter Rebbe also taught about dreams. And so we'll start with the dreams. How much time do we have? We don't have time. So tomorrow, God willing, we'll start with his essay on dreams in Torah Or. And hopefully by the end of the week, we'll have time to get to the shorter essay that he wrote that same week that he celebrated Yud Kislev the first time. So I think that will be very interesting, because the dream is exactly somewhere where you can experience the underlying understanding that he has of how change and not change work together in the same reality. But really, to see the not changing is the challenge.
I just wrote a story for Sarah B'Teves, which is called Yom HaKadosh HaKlali, about a lady